the wolf hunts began. But a shifter couldn't survive without their magic. To be drained was certain death. My brother and I had lived our lives running from both sides, and my parents were convinced that the wolves would never accept us, and the witches would just drain us. From what I'd seen of our world, I was inclined to believe they were right. If someone had found my parents together, obviously mated, they would have killed them on sight. I wore a talisman which suppressed my witch and wolf scent. I still had access to both sides, but anyone coming across me wouldn't know I was anything other than an ordinary human. The police officers said what they needed to say, and made the necessary somber faces before leaving. It was back to work as normal for them. But for me, my entire world was starting to implode. Quickly, I ran up to Jacob's room, wrapped him up in his blankets, and bundled him into my car. My parents had trained me on what to do if this sort of situation ever occurred, and had made sure there was a plan. Leaving my cell phone in the kitchen, I grabbed our go-bags out of the hallway closet. I was to go to one of their closest friends, Sean Phillips. He would know what to do from there. I took one last look around the house. The living room where we had sat every year at Christmas, opening our presents. The kitchen where we had eaten breakfast nearly every morning. Slowly, I pulled my resolve around me as I pushed the reality of the situation down into a place where I would have to deal with it later. Because now I had to be strong. I had to be strong for Jacob. I pulled the front door shut on the house, closed on my old life, got into my car and drove away. It was time to run. 2. Calli. 6 weeks later. I hitched Jacob up onto my hip so that his sleeping head lay on my shoulder, and walked toward the luggage carousel. Thankfully, he'd slept through most of the last flight, and I had been able to sit back and relax. It had been a long 6 weeks. My parents had made this plan for us long ago. As soon as Sean saw me at his front door, his face fell. There was only one reason why I would be there. He pulled me into his arms and held me while I fell apart. It was the only time I'd allowed myself to cry. After I pulled myself together, he patted me on the head and silently got to work, liquidating my parents' estate in England. They already had another home set up in Arbington, Maine. It was some kind of cabin they'd bought a few years ago under an offshore corporation they'd formed explicitly for that purpose. It was untraceable, and it was the escape plan if we were ever discovered. At first, I didn't want to go. It didn't seem right to take Jacob away from everything that he had ever known. It had been an accident, after all. Sean had gone to check the accident site and said he didn't see any signs of foul play, but he was getting a copy of the police report just in case. He was still convinced that this was the best idea, though. Sean and my parents were involved in things that skirted on the edge of illegal in our society. In fact, screw it, they were totally illegal. When you helped people run from the council, who were supposed to look after them, they tended to put laws in place to stop you from doing it. Shifter society was just as corrupt as human society, though, and it was only people like Sean and my parents that made it survivable for some of our kind. In the end, we'd gotten on the flight. I'd just have to worry later down the line if I was making the right decision. I was too exhausted to argue anymore. The flight had been pretty dead, thankfully. We had flown from Heathrow to Washington, D.C., and then on to Portland, where we had just landed. We'd been travelling for nearly 12 hours, and Jacob had passed out as soon as we were seated for the second flight. He was taking everything pretty well, but I think that was just because he didn't realise what was going on. He was only 5, after all. Most of our things had been abandoned at the house. Apparently there were supplies in our new home, but I would no doubt have to replace a lot of our belongings. I couldn't think about that right now, though. I was exhausted. I just needed to get our one checked bag, pick up the rental car, and get us to the house so we could crash. I was running on fumes at the moment, but I needed to get Jacob somewhere safe before I could relax. My wolf was spinning out of control. She hated the enclosed space of the airplane and the upheaval of leaving our home, our den, behind. She was distressed enough at the loss of my parents, our pack. I'd need to go for a run soon, but I didn't have the luxury of doing that in the near future. I gently